Tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings, everyone. Thank you, Matt, for the introduction, and thank you to the Waikato University for hosting this event. Can I acknowledge the presence of former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison? It is a pleasure to have you back in the country. Some of you may not be aware that Scott had an even more important role than that of Prime Minister of Australia, which was he was in charge of promoting New Zealand's tourism sector and did a very good job of that. We're also in the business of wanting to promote that tourism sector a bit more, so it's good to have you and we'll be picking your brains for ideas. It's also a pleasure to be here for the third year in a row because I think this is an event which brings together great thinking and great challenge. And as Matt says, the world is changing fast. Orthodoxies are being challenged. Deglobalisation, tariffs, counter-tariffs, artificial intelligence, conflict, cynicism about national institutions, extreme climatic events, increasing competition for food, energy, minerals, and other resources. Leaders around the world are being compelled to act more boldly than they have for several decades. Where once countries could take for granted their position in the world, it is now unquestionable that we need to place ourselves in the driver's seat for our national interests. And these issues are not just the concerns of diplomats, leaders, and elites. People the world over are increasingly feeling the effects of declining living standards, soaring prices, unaffordable housing, and incomes that are not keeping up. Is it any wonder that there is a growing sense that the benefits of progress are not being evenly shared, or that citizens are questioning the institutions and conventions they were raised to rely on? I think it's hard not to look back on the past few decades and see some complacency. Where once there was an assumption about the inevitability of economic growth, a given to be traded off against a host of other values, that stance now seems blissfully naive. From the United Kingdom to the European Union to China to the United States, there is a growing realisation that growth must be fought for and that even once achieved can easily slide away. Of course, we in New Zealand are not immune to these trends. In fact, I think we are at a moment of inflection. After 3 years of struggle, many Kiwis feel poorer, less financially secure, and less hopeful about their futures. The cost of living is a daily concern. New Zealanders have been through the ringer. Where once there was triumphalism about our response to and recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, I think there is now a widely shared realisation that we are still paying the economic price for the disruption the pandemic wreaked. The aftershocks of extended lockdowns included a generational spike in inflation and the cost of living, extraordinary interest rate hikes, ongoing disruption to migration flows, massive increases in government debt, and a structural deficit in the government books. These blows landed on an economy that had already been showing cracks. New Zealand already faced long-standing issues of low productivity growth, low capital intensity in our firms, low levels of competition in many sectors, challenges in attracting and retaining skills and talent, low uptake of innovation, declining housing affordability, and a growing tail of New Zealanders leaving school without basic skills. And today, as Kiwis suffer the real-life effects of economic problems, it's become even more urgent that we address these complex challenges. Now, of course, for the economists in the room, observations about these economic problems can be understood as data points. For many Kiwis, of course, it is more personal, more visceral, and far harder to stomach. The cost of living is too high and they need to see a path out. Despite falling inflation and interest rates and rising business and consumer confidence, many New Zealanders tell me they still can't get on top of their bills, even though they are working harder than ever. They tell me they are worried about whether they have saved enough for their retirement and that they are concerned about their kids' prospects should they stay in New Zealand. And so my message to New Zealanders is this: it is tough right now, but our country has far better years ahead of it. It's actually easy to lose sight of the reasons to be optimistic. But let's be confident about how great New Zealand's potential is. In a world facing multiple challenges, we have some extraordinary advantages. We are a safe, secure country with established trading relationships and a reputation as a good place to do business. We are blessed with abundant natural resources, everything from ocean to fresh water, fertile land to minerals and temperate weather. And in a time of growing concerns about food security, we have the world's best farmers, feeding more than 40 million people with levels of efficiency and sustainability that are the envy of the world. We have a long history of stable democracy, strong institutions and rule of law. And we've produced world-leading scientific breakthroughs, from splitting the atom, yes, that was us, to the Hamilton jet boat. And our entrepreneurs and innovators have converted their ideas into world-beating successes, from Oscar-winning digital effects to rockets in space. New Zealand has what it takes to succeed, but for too long we've put up stop signs and road cones when we should have been putting our pedal to the metal. And so our government's mission is to make the most of New Zealand's potential so we can grow the economy and ease the cost of living for New Zealanders. Our plan is simple: remove the barriers that have held back growth and create the conditions that allow businesses to create better paying jobs, more financial security for our families, and more income to pay for world-class education and health services. Today I am releasing a document that shows how our government is putting that plan into action. Here we are. There are copies available down the back. Going for Growth, this document is a snapshot of the government's activity in 5 key areas, all designed to ease the cost of living and grow our economy. The document identifies more than 80 separate initiatives that have been completed or are underway. Don't worry, I'm not about to list them all. But I do encourage you to give it a read. Going for Growth will be updated on a regular basis, and we are actively seeking your feedback on its content and any actions you think should be added or prioritised. The document focuses on 5 areas which are essential to improving the performance of the New Zealand economy. Number 1, developing talent by lifting education and skills. Too many of our kids have been leaving school without the basics they need to succeed in an increasingly demanding world. This is a moral failure. It's also a fiscal and economic time bomb. And our government is improving our education system to deliver a better future for Kiwi kids. Number 2, competitive business settings. Excessive and badly designed regulations have slowed New Zealand down, added costs, and prevented too many good ideas from becoming reality. Several of our major sectors lack competition, and consumers are paying the ever higher price. Our government is removing red tape, reducing compliance costs, and promoting competition to deliver a better deal for Kiwi consumers. Number 3, promoting global trade and investment. New Zealand is a small country, geographically distant from many of the world's large economies. We need to keep pursuing trade relationships and international connections, not only to get good markets and prices for our exports, but also to keep up with emerging technologies and to access the world's talent and capital. Our government is growing our trade relationships and rolling out the welcome mat for international investment so that we can deliver better paying jobs for Kiwis. Number 4, innovation, technology and science. New Zealand's science system is simply not geared up for the future economy. Our businesses have often been slow to invest in the technology needed to make them more productive. So we are modernising our science and innovation system to deliver a better deal for Kiwi businesses who want to use science and tech to grow. Number 5, infrastructure for growth. New Zealand's resource management system has been weaponised against development, adding cost, slowing things down and stopping too many projects. Despite abundant buildable land, housing remains unaffordable for too many. Major infrastructure projects are too slow, too expensive and too few. Our government is removing roadblocks to delivery of housing and infrastructure and fast-tracking major developments so we can deliver better living standards for New Zealanders. Some of you will be familiar with the reforms we already have underway in each of these areas. So today I want to share some thoughts about a few areas where I think more reform is needed. First, driving competition in sectors that are vital to our national interests, including banking, grocery and electricity. The economic impetus for this is clear. Strong competition protects consumer interests, it puts downward pressure on costs, it incentivises innovation and investment, it supports efficient allocation of resources, and it drives productivity. But when I look around the business landscape today, I see too many sectors where market power has become entrenched to the detriment of everyday New Zealanders. I see vested interests winning and everyday Kiwis missing out. New Zealand has had significant mergers and consolidation across major industries. Big fish have been swallowing the little fish, and regulatory barriers have stopped new fish from entering the pond. And while many supersized businesses have flourished, in too many cases, the Kiwis they sell to have experienced higher prices, fewer choices, and a worse deal all around. In my view, lawmakers and regulators have been far too complacent about diminishing levels of competition in vital areas. Large-scale mergers have been repeatedly allowed in major industries, with so-called efficiency prioritised over the interests of consumers. Well-intended regulations have become a moat, stopping challenges from disrupting the status quo. The result? A raw deal for Kiwi consumers. The dominance of big fish has also made it difficult for many small businesses to grow into larger businesses. We see it in the banking industry, which the Commerce Commission has described as a highly profitable two-tier oligopoly, and you know that the government is taking action to address this. And we see it in the supermarket sector, in which 3 large entities, 2 of whom don't compete on the same island, effectively control 82% of the market. The result, according to the Commerce Commission's report in 2022, is that competition between grocery retailers is muted, profits are high, product ranges are limited, and shoppers pay higher prices than people in many other countries. In this environment, it's almost impossible for a new entrant to establish a foothold in the New Zealand market. Even if they are able to battle their way through the thicket of resource management and overseas investment regulation, they are confronted in many cases by an absence of suitable land for new supermarket developments, it has been land banked by the established players. Some of our best food producers also tell me they are struggling because of the duopolistic practices of the major players. If Kiwi food producers can't afford to keep their products on New Zealand supermarket shelves, how are they ever going to grow to the point where they can export overseas? The supermarket lobby, of course, will find 1,000 different ways to say this is not the case, but it is. The OECD has this to say about the New Zealand supermarket sector, and I quote, "Two major players dominate the market through their portfolio of different brands. As a result, they can extract higher prices from consumers, oligopoly power, but also exert oligopsony power on their suppliers, passing on costs and uncertainty to them with the threat of removing products from shelves if suppliers disagree." And studies have shown that New Zealand supermarkets were the most expensive for kitchen staples compared with the UK, Ireland and Australia. And if you still doubt the findings of the OECD, the academic research papers and the Commerce Commission, just ask the everyday mums and dads at the checkout. Kiwi shoppers feel ripped off. I think of PK, the Kiwi man who went viral on TikTok. Maybe the students at the back will have watched that TikTok. He shared how he cried when he discovered how much cheaper the food was when he moved to Australia. And I think of the parents in the supermarket aisle putting back the chocolate biscuits as the weekly shop blows their budget again. And I think of all those people who endure gut-wrenching anxiety as they watch their items being scanned and the numbers tallying up on the till. The weekly supermarket shop makes up a significant proportion of most people's weekly budget and contributes massively to their cost of living. They deserve to know they are getting a fair deal. Right now, I don't think they are. And I'm ready to pull out all the stops to get them the fairer deal they deserve. The supermarkets will fight back, I'm sure. I'm up for the fight. So what can the government do? Let me reassure you, we are not going to open our own grocery chain. There will be no Kiwi shop. Instead, I would like to see another competitor enter the supermarket scene to disrupt the major players, drive down prices and increase options for Kiwi shoppers. Over the past 12 months, international supermarket chains and local investors have expressed interest in entering the New Zealand grocery market. I want to help them succeed. We owe it to Kiwi shoppers to help remove the barriers that could get in the way of a new entrant. That could include removing unnecessary regulatory hurdles in the Overseas Investment Act, Resource Management Act, and the rest of the regulatory maze. It could include helping them to access suitable land and properties for development, helping them to attract capital, cracking down on predatory pricing, and ensuring they have fair access to products. If a new grocery chain opened up here, it would deliver massive gains for Kiwi shoppers. So I'm up for actions needed to help make it happen. At the same time, the government must continue our efforts to hold the existing supermarket chains accountable to their customers and suppliers. That means enhancing consumer protections and correcting power imbalances between suppliers and supermarkets. It means strengthening the grocery supply code, enforcing against non-compliance and illegal conduct, introducing a wholesale code to enhance access for smaller retailers, introducing disclosure standards for consumer complaints, and responding to further recommendations the Commerce Commission is due to make in the coming months. Commerce Minister Andrew Bailey has already been pushing hard in this space. This year, we're dialling up the pressure. The major supermarket chains should listen up. Our government is on the side of Kiwi shoppers, and we will act to defend their interests. Number two, in the area of reforms that I want to progress, the government's approach to procurement. The government is a huge player in the New Zealand economy. Every year it procures billions of dollars worth of goods and services. And those doing the procuring understandably pay close attention to prices. That's as it should be. We want value for money. The Minister of Finance demands it. But getting value is not just about cost. Getting value is also about assessing the contribution particular contracts can make to New Zealand as a whole. The government wants our agencies doing the procuring to assess the value as well as the cost of contracts. Small and medium-sized businesses say that too often they can't even effectively bid for government contracts because of the complexity and bureaucracy of official procurement processes. So I am reviewing the government's procurement rules that cause this, and I will soon be recommending changes to Cabinet. I want to ensure value to New Zealand is properly considered when agencies are picking suppliers, ensuring a more level playing field, improving the ability of smaller businesses to bid, and giving more small and medium-sized Kiwi businesses the opportunity to grow and become global players. Third, tax settings. New Zealand must ensure our tax settings are competitive with other countries who seek to lure our talent, ideas and jobs. We need to ensure the New Zealand tax system does not discourage business people from investing in their businesses and does not deter foreign investment. So I am considering a range of proposals to make our tax settings more competitive over time. Fourth, affordable energy. Alongside the supermarket bill, electricity prices are a major pain point for Kiwi households. Spiking prices and uncertain supply are also a major barrier to industry and the jobs it supports. And as we look out to the world, it is clear that those choosing to invest in manufacturing, data centres and technological parks will increasingly ask themselves, does the country that we want to invest in have secure, affordable and renewable energy? And New Zealand is pretty well positioned for that. We already have abundant levels of renewable energy. The question is, are we well positioned to bring on new generation at the pace needed to keep both security of supply and affordability? And that is a question that the government is very much engaged in. The Energy Competition Task Force has published proposals to give consumers more control over energy costs. And in addition, independent reviewers will report to ministers in the middle of the year on the performance of the energy market. My view is that the world's surging demand for renewable energy has changed the game. And it is time to think much more boldly about the actions the government may need to take to bring on new generation, security of supply and affordable electricity. Fifth, and finally, savings. We need KiwiSaver working as well as possible for New Zealanders. Commerce Minister Andrew Bailey already has work underway to enable KiwiSaver providers to make greater investments in private assets, to generate good returns for savers and ensure more Kiwi savings can be deployed for investment here at home. I want to see KiwiSaver balances grow, both to make Kiwis better off in retirement and to grow our collective national savings. I'm taking options and advice on how to achieve that with a view to taking recommendations to Cabinet this year. Let me finish now by providing you with some perspective. Our domestic context is challenging. Internationally, we are arguably operating in a more complex, faster changing world than at any time in history. But when I look around the world, there is nowhere I would rather build a business or raise my family than here in New Zealand. Even so, the world doesn't owe us a living. We have to compete hard to deliver for our national interests and the interests of New Zealanders. Our government's plan to grow the economy is about making the most of New Zealand's many advantages, removing barriers that are holding Kiwis back and competing for our fair share of the world's wealth. And this is not an abstract mission. It goes to the heart of what matters to every New Zealander. To create better paying jobs and make Kiwis more financially secure, we must grow our economy. To deliver better health services and schools, we must grow our economy. To make New Zealand more resilient to global challenges, we must grow our economy. This government backs New Zealanders to succeed. I know you do too, and I wish you a successful conference and look forward to hearing your ideas. Let's go for growth.
All right, I have 1,000 questions and we have 3 minutes. So there have been some questions that have come through on the app. And so I think we'll probably realistically only have time for a couple. I know you've got a very busy day ahead visiting some local businesses. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Fizz. Visiting some local businesses, and also I'm conscious of needing to keep us on track for the day. So the first question that came through on the app on the environment, on other things outside of economic growth.
Well, I've always viewed that the economy and the environment go hand in hand, particularly in New Zealand's case. As I described, much of what gives us comparative advantage is the gifts of our environment. So for our long-term growth, actually preserving those is important. That doesn't mean we shouldn't make use of them. And I have the view that the line has gone too far towards obstructing the use of our natural resources and too far away from growth. So I think this is a question of where we draw that line. And my view is that in recent years, we've got very good at saying no, very good at wringing our hands about what might happen and naysaying, and that has meant we have said no to too many things. And it is time to say yes a lot more often. Because the alternative is we indulge ourselves with lots of no and end up with very poor people. And that is not our future I want for our country.
Thank you. I'll ask one question then, and I guess it's about the context here. So a year ago you stood on the stage, and I looked back at my notes last night. It was your first 100 days. We said, what's happening? It feels like the cupboard was bare, what were you going to do? There was a bit of a feeling of that, in some senses, as you've highlighted, it can feel tougher now. Now you're only 18 months away from the next election campaign. Many of the things you've talked about, both in regulatory reform or in productivity, those are long burn issues. Education and skills gaps, deregulation, new players entering markets. Those won't happen in that 18-month cycle. What should the New Zealand public expect to see within the next 18 months when they're looking at assessing your government coming into the next cycle?
Well, the first thing is I'd say, actually, we have a responsibility to take pretty urgent action on those long-term problems. I think if politicians tend to the view that, oh, look, that one's a slow burn, I'm not going to have anything out of it by 2026, let's not bother, then that is a recipe for decline in our economy. And so we are cracking the whip on reforms like those to the Resource Management Act, where we intend to introduce replacement legislation this year, because we recognise that until we do that, we have to put up with a system that is holding back development. But your point is absolutely right. I am a politician, and I do look to that time in 2026 when I want to be able to turn to New Zealanders and tell them what our government's delivered. And for me, it goes back to the commitments we made. We said, first up, we're going to stabilise inflation by bringing discipline back to government spending. I'm really pleased that as I stand here today, inflation is well back in target. We said, look, if we get inflation under control, we'll get interest rates coming down so your mortgage is more affordable and businesses can afford to invest. And I'm delighted that we have had successive drops in the OCR, and I hope there's more coming. And then we have to grow the economy. And the case for us has been that the revision and forecast since we came in, as Treasury realised its earlier optimism was misplaced, have meant that the path to growth is harder, the mountain we have to climb is steeper. But for me, That means that the test New Zealanders will place on us is not, did you talk about it, but was it delivered? And I have great confidence we will deliver it, not because of anything to do with me or my particular abilities, but frankly because I know that if we set the conditions, New Zealanders have got what it takes. There will be people who will start new businesses, exporters who will take on new markets, employers who will take on more people. So, Matt, when I turn to people in 2026, I want to say inflation's sorted, interest rates are lower, and the economy is growing, and more people are back in work.
Great. All right. Thank you to the Minister of Finance, Nicola Willis.